Yeah, because you can't see over.
I was just going to say, Austin, I don't think I have a problem with those two.
Team, are we good? You have a signal? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Constitution Day here at the Columbus campus of the Ohio Media School. Constitution Day, or Citizenship Day, as we were just talking about, is an American federal observance that recognizes the adoption of the United States Constitution as well as those who have become U.S. citizens. It is normally observed today, September 17th, the day in 1787 that delegates to the Constitutional Convention signed the document in Philadelphia. In honor of Constitution Day, it is my privilege to introduce today's guest speaker at the Ohio Media School's Columbus campus. Charleta B. Tavares, Democrat, Columbus, was reelected and sworn in on January 5th, 2015 as the state senator for the 15th District and assistant Democratic leader in the Ohio Senate. A committed public servant, she has served since 2011 as state senator, which includes Bexley and parts of Grandview Heights, as well as the historic neighborhoods of the city of Columbus. She currently serves as the Senate ranking member on both the Ways and Means and the Health and Human Services committees. In addition, she also serves as a member of the Finance Subcommittee on Corrections, Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee, Joint Committee on Agency Rules and Review, and serves as co-chair of the Ohio Constitutional Modernization Commission. Senator Tavares previously served as member of the Columbus City Council from 1999 to 2010. Prior to joining council, Ms. Tavares left a legacy for the citizens of Ohio during her 5.5-year tenure in the Ohio General Assembly as the state representative in the 22nd House District. Ms. Tavares is the first African-American and Democrat female to serve in the state legislature from Franklin County, Ohio, both the House and Senate, and the first African-American woman ever to hold a leadership position in the history of the Ohio General Assembly. Senator Tavares' legislative priorities include the elimination of health, education, and criminal justice disparities, investment in Ohio's infrastructure, consumer protection, and addressing family stability. Senator Tavares is a native of Columbus. She attended Eastmore High School, Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as The Ohio State University. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to give a warm Ohio Media School welcome to Ohio Senator Charleta Tavares.
Thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate that introduction and certainly appreciate the students here at the Ohio Media Center and the Center for Broadcasting. We really appreciate, first of all, that you're located here in Columbus, Ohio. I think you might still be in my Senate district. I should have checked that before I came to the campus today. I generally have, as was shared, the older historic neighborhoods of Columbus, but I go as far east as McNaughton Road, so you're probably in my Senate district. And I'm very proud of the city of Columbus and certainly the district that I represent. I happen to represent the state capitol building. So as we talk about Constitution Day, Federal Constitution Day in the city of Columbus, the state of Ohio, it's important for all of us to recognize that it's been 228 years since the Constitution was ratified. That's important because it is the framework of our federal government, of our United States of America, the framework with which we operate as individual states and as a country. We also have a state constitution, and every state has their own constitution, which is a framework within a framework. And in fact, the state of Ohio is going through the review. We're reviewing every section of our Constitution to see if it's still relevant, if there are any sections that we need to modify, to eliminate, to change, or to add to. And that's what the Ohio Constitutional Modernization Commission, which I serve as the co-chair, is doing right now. It's generally, we meet on the second Thursday of the month. It's open to the public, and what I would say to all of you is that I would wish that all of our meetings were televised so that the residents throughout the state of Ohio who cannot come to the state capitol building in Columbus, Ohio, can participate, can hear, can view what's happening with legislators and community members, because it's a 32-member body. It means that we have representation from Democrats and Republicans, equal members from the two parties, so that we have 12 members from both the House and the Senate. That ensures that we have equal voice at the table. And then 20 members that are general public members. They come from all over the state of Ohio. So the 32 members of the Ohio Constitutional Modernization Commission are the ones that are reviewing the state's constitution. But we also have the public that comes in and testifies, gives us ideas on what they think should be either changed, added to, parts of our Constitution that they believe are obsolete, that they would like to change. And that's a healthy way of reviewing our Constitution. What we have to do is to make sure that at least 2/3 of the members of the commission agree to any changes when they come to the full body, the full 32-member body. That's important too, because it ensures that one party or the other, or one faction that might develop with the commission, doesn't control the outcome. When you have to have 2/3 of the members of the commission agree to a language change or a deletion within the Constitution, it's important that you have buy-in from people with different perspectives. And so having 2/3 requirement in a vote is really important. And then what the Constitutional Modernization Commission does is submit its recommendations to the Ohio General Assembly. The General Assembly can either act on those recommendations, or if they choose not to act on the recommendations, those recommendations could then end up on the ballot. The legislature could put them, adopt them and put them in a ballot initiative, or the people of Ohio could do the same thing. That's important because our Constitution is really the guideline for the state of Ohio. It really should share our values, our principles, what we believe is important in the state of Ohio. If it's not a constitution change that's necessary, then we always have the Ohio General Assembly, where we can pass a bill that would become law to do what we think is in the best interest of the residents of our state. For those of you who don't know about the Ohio General Assembly, we have 33 senators. I'm one of 33. For the women in the audience, out of those 33 members, there are only 8 women. We're in the midst of discussions around the presidential election, which will take place next year. And on the Republican side, there's 1 woman. Right now, on the Democrat side, there's only 1 woman. So as a population, we're about 52% of the population in the state of Ohio, about 50% throughout the country, and still we're underrepresented. So out of the 33 members of the Senate, 8 are women, 3 Republican women and 5 Democrat women. So my party is doing a little bit better in getting women. Out of the 10 members in the Senate who happen to be Democrats, 5 out of our 10 are women. That's important. For those who are African American or people of color that may be in this audience or may be watching or viewing this program, we have right now 15 members who happen to be African American. We have 2 that are Latino in the Ohio House of Representatives, and that still is not representative of the people of the state of Ohio. We want to make sure that all voices are heard. That's part of what the Constitution, both of the state of Ohio and the federal government, is all about, a representative government, to ensure that we have a one person, one vote design in our government so that the voices of everyone are heard. And then those who are elected, those of us who serve in either the state legislature, the city council, the federal government, either on the congressional side or the Senate side, that voices of people from throughout the United States, throughout the state of Ohio, or throughout your community are heard, that their perspective is shared, and that when you come up with decisions, and I believe in compromise and consensus, that when you come up with decisions, you're doing what's in the best interest of the people of that geographic area. And that's why we have frameworks. That's why we really fight to protect the one person, one vote. That's why citizenship is so important, because along with citizenship also goes responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is to participate in your government. Our government was designed to be of, by, and for the people. You've heard candidates who are now running for president talk about a government. Our government is as good as we make it, the citizenry, and it's as bad as we allow it to become. We have to participate. We can't blame it on other people. We've got to take our responsibility seriously. We've got to participate and learn about those who want to represent you. And if you don't think they're the best people to represent you, us ourselves. Because again, we're supposed to have a representative government, people from all walks of life, not just those who are wealthy, those who are well educated, those who work white-collar jobs. We want people from all walks of life so that government is representative of, by, and for the people who we say we want to represent. Now, I've been blessed. I had the fortune of being elected as a state representative back in the 90s. I served in the Ohio House of Representatives, and then later was elected to Columbus City Council and served there for 11 years. And as I was sharing with Scott, I had the fortune, even before I went into public service, to serve as what we call jobcasters on what was known as the government television channel back in the 80s. And at that time, it was the government channel's way of sharing job opportunities that were available to the residents of Central Ohio. So my husband and I became one of those jobcasters. So I shared with Scott that I might be a jobcaster, TV personality. And then later I shared with him that as the member of Columbus City Council and the chair of the Health, Housing, and Human Services Committee, I had my committee hearings live and televised, and they're replayed on the government television channel. So again, you're before the camera. I also shared with him that I've done a radio show. For years I did VKO radio, sharing news and views of what's going on in the public sector that I represented at the time, whether it was the House of Representatives or whether it was Columbus City Council. And then most recently I had a show on Talktainment Radio, the online radio show. And I think it's important for me as a public official to share with the people that I represent what I'm doing, as well as share with them what's going on so that the people, again, can participate in their government. They can weigh in on whatever issues we're discussing. I shared with you my newsletter, and that's another way that I do my communications about what I'm doing as a public servant. I'm here to serve the people that I represent. And so one way of doing that is to share with them what I'm doing on their behalf. That way the public gets the information. They can weigh in on the issue. If they choose to come in and testify at any of the hearings, then they have that information as well. The other point that I want to make around Constitution Day is that the Ohio Constitutional Modernization Commission is also, the full commission meetings are live. They're streamed live. And you can also get the replays so that you can hear what's going on with the Constitution discussion in the state of Ohio. All the committee meetings are not taped or streamed live, and that can come to Columbus, Ohio. I am very fortunate as a state senator that I don't have to travel to Columbus to participate as a member of the Ohio General Assembly. I am right here in Columbus. Some of my colleagues travel 3 hours to get here. So they can't go back and forth and go to community meetings or participate like I'm doing today with the Center for Broadcasting here in Ohio. They would have to wait until they're back in their hometown. If they're in Youngstown, they would have to wait until they got back to Youngstown, either on Thursday night or Friday, to do anything like this. It's unfortunate that the people who want to weigh in can't take off from work and come down to Columbus and testify. If we use the technology that you all are learning here at the center to utilize effectively, we could use the communications modes to allow people to testify, through a teleconference or a two-way streaming of wherever that person is and the Ohio General Assembly. That would be important because then we would have more people weighing in. We have very few people other than the paid advocacy groups or the paid lobbyists come in and testify unless they live in Columbus, Ohio. That's unfortunate because we need to hear from you. We need to hear how the bills that we're discussing are going to impact you, because I only know how things impact me or how people tell me that bills or policies are impacting them or programs are working or not. So that's why communication is so important. You've got to find ways to bring that information to you as a legislator as well as to your colleagues in whatever body you serve in. In this case, to bring it back to the 33 members of the Senate so that I can build a consensus to pass a bill that is in the best interest of the people of Ohio. I shared with Scott that I was more than willing to take some questions, so I'm going to open it up to those of you who are in today's classroom to open it up to you for any questions. And I'll repeat the questions if you choose. Yes.
So how did you first get started, like with city council and all of that?
That's a very good question. The question is, how did I get started in public service? I got started as a staff member. I served as a legislative assistant to a state representative, former state representative Ray Miller. I started volunteering with him because I was volunteering with a number of organizations and the Columbus Urban League, and he was at one of those meetings, and he was a brand new state representative, and at that time they had to share a secretary, and they didn't have any full-time legislative staff support. So he asked me if I could help him by volunteering in his office, and that's what I did. I volunteered. I did that for 1.5 years. Thankfully, my husband picked up the financial responsibilities, and I stayed there, and then when a position opened up, then I was able to get the position. So that's why I encourage everyone to look at where you have a passion, where you have an interest. Volunteer, intern, follow or shadow that individual or that organization, participate in that organization, because you will then find out when those positions are available. Other questions? Yes?
With groups such as Black Lives Matter and the current situation between people and cops nowadays, what is Ohio doing on the state level to bridge the gap between cop and the public?
That's a very good question. Police-community relations or community-police relations is critically important. The state of Ohio, the governor did establish a task force that was looking at just those issues. They've now seated the members of that commission that is looking at our policies, our training for law enforcement, as well as training and interactions between communities, looking at best practices throughout the state of Ohio, throughout the nation. Cincinnati has a better program based on what we've heard from members of the commission. They are working on developing public policy laws that we can adopt. One of the members of the commission is a colleague of mine in the Ohio Senate. from Cincinnati, former police officer, former community relations director in Cincinnati, Senator Cecil Thomas. And he is coming up with a number of bills, one that deals specifically with training, to ensure that there's cultural competence training, to ensure that there's de-escalation tactics so that law enforcement understands how to deal with individuals who may be under some kind of a substance. They may be in some kind of an excited delirium, or they could have a serious mental health issue. So all kinds of training that we've identified throughout the country that helps to develop a better police response in those kinds of situations. Other questions? Yes?
If the presidential election was tomorrow, who would get your vote?
Oh, that's a very good question. If the presidential election was held tomorrow, who would get my vote? Well, I am a strong supporter of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and for very important reasons for me. I support those who support the issues that are important to me and who have a demonstrated track record. Children are most important to me. Hillary Clinton has stood long before she was ever the First Lady, before she was ever the Secretary of State, on issues around children and their protection. She worked with the Children's Defense Fund as a lawyer and worked very hard on education issues, on child welfare issues, issues around abuse, neglect, and dependency, issues around child support. So that's one of the reasons I support her, and she's been a champion for expanding health care to the uninsured before it was popular when she was the First Lady. She's also a person that worked really hard on issues around civil rights, human rights, and women's rights. I think we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Beijing Conference on Women, and she was one of the leading speakers. As Secretary of State, she went around the world and highlighted the plight of women, not just in this country, but throughout the world, who were treated as second-class citizens, getting young girls education in those countries where it's forbidden, getting young girls into health care so that they didn't have premature births as preteens and younger. So those are some of the reasons I support her. Am I disappointed on some of the issues? Absolutely. Is there a perfect candidate in any party? Absolutely not, because we're all human. And that's what we've got to remember, that all of us have our failings. No one is perfect, and none of us will get out of this life being perfect. So I support her. There are some things that I would like her to kind of speak to as the campaign continues. But at this point, she's my candidate. Other questions? Yes?
Could you further elaborate on SB 73?
Could you give me the title? I've got so many bills I've introduced, I don't remember them by number.
To require community colleges and state community colleges, technical colleges and university branches to comply with minority business enterprise.
Very good. Well, the bill that was referred to, Senate Bill 73, this would require community colleges to follow the same laws as the public sector. There are set-aside laws for goods and services for the state of Ohio for all public sectors, that a percentage of the contracts for services would be set aside for racial, ethnic communities. And a study was done years ago. It all comes out of a bill that was adopted back in the early 80s. I think it was 1981, House Bill 583, that required a percentage of the goods and services contracts, 15%, to be set aside for those racial ethnic firms that were designated by the federal government and the state government as minority business enterprises. We also have an EDGE, which are disadvantaged businesses, which regardless of the race or ethnicity, anybody making less than a certain amount as a business could be considered an EDGE business. And I want community colleges, because they aren't specifically complying with that law, to be included in it as our state colleges and universities are. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, were you wondering if you're going to like maybe do something where you can actually like lower the cost of further education for students across the state?
That's an excellent question as well. College tuition is very, and lowering the cost is certainly a priority of mine, and it has been for the governor and for members of the other party, as I refer to my colleagues who happen to be Republicans. Many of us are concerned because people graduate from college or post-secondary education with huge debts, and they can't pay it, or the salaries that they make when they come out of those educational opportunities they're not enough to not only take care of them and their living expenses and responsibilities, but then to pay back those loans if the individual has taken out a loan. So there are efforts both at the state level and the federal level. At the state level, in the last budget that we passed, we put some constraints on our colleges and universities on how much they could increase tuition. We're also looking at other ways of either loan repayment programs. One of the areas that I'm real concerned about is the huge debt, several $100,000 debt that our providers like physicians and nurses and those with the advanced degrees have when they graduate, that they can't go into practice, primary health care or general practice, because the salaries aren't enough to pay off several $100,000 in debt. And so there are fields of study where you can get your loan repaid as long as you're working in the public sector, meaning a government position or a nonprofit organization. I'm trying to expand that to other kinds of opportunities, other educational areas, so that it's not just for lawyers and for doctors, but some of the other sectors where we need employees, where we're void of those employees that employers need throughout the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm.
So just go back on what you were saying. You did mention how the income that they receive after they get out of post-secondary education is not enough. Do you agree with maybe raising the minimum wage to like $10 or $12 an hour?
Absolutely. I've been a strong supporter of raising the minimum wage. I would like to see it at $15. What we know in the city of Columbus in particular is that in the city of Columbus, you have to make at least $12.31 an hour in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment. I've done a lot of work on affordable housing, and that's one of the major issues, why people are either evicted, why people are homeless, why people are couch surfing, because they can't afford an apartment. And if you have a mom with one or two children who is trying to make ends meet, working several part-time jobs, or a dad who's got several children, or a wife and a child job at $7 or $8 an hour, and then trying to work another one, it is difficult. And you miss one payment or you have one illness and you may be on the street. So for me, it's the right thing to do. And when we lift people out of poverty, we're giving them more resources so that they can buy goods and services, which helps the economy. Mm-hmm.
What's your take on senior citizens coming into 2016 with some of the Medicaid and some of the health insurance changes and some of the stuff? What is Columbus's or Ohio's plan coming into 2016 for that?
Can you just give me a little
More referring to doctor bills. Some of the senior citizens who can't afford some of their Medicaid, some of their Medicare bills. How does the state look at trying to help them or ease the
I'm glad you raised the issue around senior citizens. One of the programs that people really love in the state of Ohio and in the country is Medicare. Medicare is the health insurance program for all of us. All of us, once we've turned 65, are converted to Medicare. You can have the best health care plan with your employer, you know, between whatever age you decide to retire and 65. But once you hit 65, that employer's plan goes away, and Medicare is what is in place for all of us. So no matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, you're going to have Medicare at some point in time. You can supplement, for those senior citizens who have more money, they can supplement their Medicare program, but Medicare is the first payer, and then if you have a supplemental policy, they're the secondary payer of whatever cost you have. Prescription drugs are very, very expensive, and for most senior citizens, I believe the average number of prescriptions senior citizens have are 13. Because as we get older, and particularly if we've had a hard life, or we haven't been able to take care of ourselves the way we should, we're going to have more chronic illnesses, may have some serious diseases, whether it's cancer or some other chronic illness or disease, cardiovascular disease, have had a stroke. So you're going to have lots of medications. And as you know, seniors are on fixed incomes. You know, once you retire, you get a pension. You don't get any salary increases based on performance. You get whatever cost of living, Social Security, or whatever your pension plan might be. But that is generally not enough to take care of those prescriptions. There are some plans for seniors, not enough. It's an area that I think we still need to do a whole lot more work in the state of Ohio and even at the federal level. We did a great job of expanding Medicaid, and it's lifted a lot of people out of extreme despair and getting quality health care on a continuous basis. We've provided some tax incentives for people to go into the private market exchange to get their health care. I think it's going to help even down the road with cost of health care for those as they get older. Because if you have health care on a continuous basis, if you don't go to the doctor just when you're sick, if you go in for preventative services, whether it's a mammogram or a colorectal screening, you're going to detect problems early on so that you're not going to have the serious health care costs later. That's important, and I think that's going to help our seniors. But I think, you know, America has to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry, because if we look at the cost of drugs in America versus the cost of the same drugs in Canada, in Mexico, we're paying, you and I, the taxpayers, for the research and development of these drugs. So that's why they're so expensive here. But then that research and development is then shared across the world. And they're not paying the same costs for the same drug. So we're going to have to stand up as Americans to ensure that we're treated fairly. And then we're going to have to come up with ways of buying, and the state of Ohio does buy drugs in bulk, particularly for our health centers. The federal government allows for bulk purchasing off of a standardized contract so that we can get them a little bit lower. Mm-hmm.
I got a couple questions, actually.
We'll take one, and then we're going to go to someone else, okay?
Well, the first one, SB 89, prohibit smoking in a motor vehicle with a child under the age of 6 as a passenger. How do you plan on enforcing that?
That's a good question. The bill, Senate Bill 89, I introduced in the last General Assembly. I have some interest of my colleagues But some of them, are fearful of taking away people's rights. I absolutely believe that people have the right to smoke. But when your smoking impacts the lives of someone else, that's where I put an end to it, because I don't want premature death and disease by someone else simply because somebody else has chosen to smoke. So the enforcement part is law enforcement, just like with seatbelts. If the driver is pulled over because either they're observed smoking and they see a car seat in the car, then they can get the ticket. What we've learned is secondhand smoke is more dangerous than the primary smoker smoking. You get more chemicals coming into your bloodstream with secondhand smoke. And think about it. You're in a closed environment as a little tiny baby, and this would go up to the age of 6, the bill that I've introduced. Some of the other states go up to 18 that have adopted it. I chose 6 because children can verbalize, I don't want to get in the car, or mommy don't smoke, or daddy don't smoke. But under that age, they generally have no control over if and when they get into a car with someone smoking. Well, some people say, well, open up the window. That does not move all the smoke out. Children, particularly babies, breathe much faster and heavier, so they're taking it deeper into their lungs. And so they are going to be impacted much greater. There are all kinds of chemicals in cigarettes. And so they're absorbing that in a closed environment. And so that's why I chose the 6 year of age. There are some that believe we should take it up to an older age, but as children get older, they can say, I don't want to go, or they can share it with someone else. Yes?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Kind of going back to your conversation about the minimum wage and the poverty line, I guess how proactive or how interested is the Ohio Senate in dealing with the cashback loan systems and those kind of quick one-day turnarounds? As far as, because one, they keep finding those loopholes of it's like, well, we're not giving you a loan, we're giving you a mortgage lease, but they're still charging upwards of like 200, sometimes 300% of interest. Is there an active push in that in Ohio, or is it kind of on the back burner, or I'm just trying to get an idea for like where we are in that standpoint?
Very good question. Our payday loans, our title loans, they keep finding loopholes. I was a very active advocate against the 300 and up to 600% interest that's being charged to individuals who find themselves in a position of having to go to one of those entities. I think they're a lot like legalized loan sharks because the interest is humongous. There was a bill that passed several General Assemblies ago that attempted to close the loophole, but they found a way around it. And at this point, I don't see that there's a strong effort in the General Assembly to close the loophole. There are advocacy organizations. There's the Coalition for Responsible Lending that is still working on the issue. I'm certainly supportive of any effort to eliminate these loopholes so that the people don't get into a vicious cycle of loan after loan after loan and never get from underneath them. I've never understood the whole title loan situation, because it's like, so if you don't pay the loan, will they come and get your car? How much is the car worth? Is it really an industry that should even exist? I think we've got to do more in the state of Ohio. But at this point, I don't see that there's a strong interest or effort to eliminate the loopholes. Yes?
A few months ago, the Ohio criminal background check, there was a major issue with that in April, I guess. The dispatch put an article out about that. And I was wondering if any of those issues have been rectified.
The last that I saw, there was an article even recently in the local paper. There have been some efforts to buy some more equipment. But if you'll recall at the time that the background check system was highlighted for its failures to identify people who had some serious criminal records and who were working with children, etc. The Attorney General said that he inherited a cobbled together system. But that had been years since he had been in office. And some of us were fighting the Attorney General's office to do more and to do it quicker. I don't think it's perfect at this point, but they are working to update the system so that they can immediately, and part of his explanation was not getting the information from the courts, not getting the cases immediately entered into a database from the various courts throughout the state of Ohio. And that should be automatic. I mean, today's technology, there's no reason you can't immediately scan, you can't immediately upload the determination of that trial or the determination of the charge immediately. Mm-hmm. Yes.
In November, the question of legalization of marijuana was on top. I just want to know in that stance.
That's a very good question. Legalization of marijuana. I have been a supporter of medical marijuana since I was in the House of Representatives back in the 90s. There have been bills introduced since probably the 80s. All righty, very good. 1972. We have somebody right here that knows the history. That was before my time. But, you know, to help people get through their illnesses and diseases, that medical marijuana seems to alleviate some of the symptoms, seems to help people get through them. Unfortunately, we've not had enough interest in the Ohio General Assembly throughout the years from 1972 on until today to pass it. Now, I have colleagues who say, oh, I'm for medical marijuana, but they've done nothing. The majority party in the House and the Senate have not moved the legislation forward, and it's been introduced. So now there's the Responsible Ohio initiative and people behind it that said, okay, we're going to take it to the people. And that's what they've done. I'm not there on recreational marijuana, but I am there for the medical marijuana. I'm not sure at this point what I'm going to do. The other issue that's concerning to me is having identified those locations in the state of Ohio where you're going to have the manufacture and growth of the marijuana. I didn't like it when it was the casino issue. I don't think that's appropriate to have it in the Constitution. If it was a bill, it would be something different. But when you put something in the Constitution, we just talked about it earlier, that's more permanent. It takes a lot to change the Constitution, both the state and the federal constitutions. And I don't believe we should protect or identify or give special privileges to people in our Constitution. We identify the actual locations, not only for this initiative, but for the casinos. Remember, we had to vote on it again. Franklin County voted against having casino gambling. But the state of Ohio decided, and we got stuck with one of those casinos right here in Franklin County. Our residents didn't want it, but they were forced to have it. And then we had to come back and vote again, remember? Because there were interested parties who didn't want it in the Arena District. So then we had to vote on another constitutional change to move the location to the West Broad Street site, the former Fisher Guide body plant out on the west side. So for those reasons, I don't know where I am right now, but I think I'm leaning against voting for it. I wish issues and I could vote on the medical marijuana, because if I had a loved one suffering from cancer or a child that had epileptic seizures, 30 and 40 times a day, I would do whatever I could to alleviate their pain and the symptoms that they have. Yes?
Well, speaking about Responsible Ohio, I don't know how much research you've done on their organization or not, but it's been widely noted that they are trying to monopolize the entire marijuana industry that's coming to Ohio. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think I'm not so much focused on the entity itself, those that initiated this this language, this constitutional change on the ballot, and as far as the investors, those investors who have helped to support putting this on the ballot, it's more about identifying entities that will have control over the growth and manufacture. Now, what they've shared with us is that that's just a part of the industry. There will be other parts of the industry that will grow outside of those 10, and so that there will be more jobs. I haven't read all of their paraphernalia and their marketing materials to be as up on the details, and certainly plan to do that before the election. But at this point, that's not the issue for me. For me, it's putting those locations in the Constitution rather than allowing the market to work, so to speak.
Well, I know essentially it will put money into the pockets of those 10 corporations or whatever that will own it all. So that really takes away from the people that really need it, I think. So yeah, please read up on that.
Will do. Yes.
I have actually heard mixed reviews on the future of the Social Security within this economy. I was wondering what future you saw for our generation personally when it comes to retirement with Social Security, and do you believe the retirement age will get pushed back?
Very good question. Probably the first question with respect to Social Security and the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund. Unfortunately, our federal government, those elected to serve you and I, have borrowed from the Social Security Fund. It would have been solvent had they not borrowed money from it and not paid back. These dollars belong to the people. We've all paid into Social Security. If you've ever worked a job, you've paid into Social Security. Some of us have had loved ones that never collected their Social Security because they died and you were either past the age of majority, whether it was 18 or 21 when your loved one passed away. And so you couldn't even collect as a child off of your parents' Social Security. Again, we've got to force them to make it solvent and then to look at maybe going beyond the cap. Right now, it's capped at a certain salary level. And beyond that, you don't pay into it. So for those individuals who make huge salaries, over $250,000 and more, they're not paying above the capped amount into Social Security. I think they should continue to pay. It's taking more individuals today to support one person on Social Security. It used to be, I think there were 6 individuals per retiree paying towards that retiree's pension. But I think it's like down to 3 now. And so as people get older, and thankfully we've found more ways to keep people healthy and alive longer. The largest growth in age cohort is those over 85. And so as people live longer, it means you're going to have that Social Security last a larger number of years. That gets to your second question with respect to age of retirement. You're hearing these commercials about, how long you think it's going to be before you retire and how long do you think your pension is going to last. That's setting us up to increase the age of of receiving Social Security and pension. Is that fair? I don't believe it is, because people did not intend to work their whole life. Is it fair that you say retirement and then you don't get to retire? Not everybody gets to live past 65. There are some populations, and I can speak for myself, my dad died of a massive heart attack at 48. He was a former smoker. He smoked until he was 38. He had a stroke. That's why I'm so passionate about health care and about smoking. He smoked till he was 38. His physician told him, if you want to see your children live, you've got to give up the cigarettes. I'll do my part as your cardiologist to see that you live to see them grow up. But if you don't give up your cigarettes, I will no longer be your cardiologist. My dad never smoked another cigarette after that conversation. We know he lived another 10 years because he gave up the cigarettes. But 48 is way too young to die. And so he didn't get to enjoy retirement with my mom. My mom has been a widow since she was 40. So how is it fair to tell people, and studies show that men die sooner than women, and people of color die sooner than Caucasians. So how is it fair that folks that are going to die early don't even get to enjoy their retirement? You're going to force them to work to 67 or 68 or 70. So then when do you get to enjoy your retirement? And who gets the retirement? If your spouse is already deceased, and certainly your children are grown. So I think we've got to put the pressure on our legislators at the federal level to fix it and to quit taking money out of what's supposed to be a trust fund. Last question.
So kind of with the amount of rural space that's across Ohio, this is kind of an issue that I've got a lot of friends that are affected by it, is it's going to sound weird, chicken. With companies like Tyson and the fact that most chicken farmers actually are living below the poverty line at this point, I guess is there any efforts specifically in Ohio to kind of mitigate or regulate the industry as that far? Because I know a couple bills have come up a little bit ago, kind of trying to regulate, the farmers get paid for the chickens instead of them being owned by the company and that kind of, and I'm just curious as to, is there any effort or is there been any focus? I know it's kind of a weird topic, so it's not a sexy topic, but it's something that I think affects a lot of Ohio.
A very good question around chicken farming and the cost and the payment of those farmers or those who raise chickens. It's not a subject I'm well versed in, so I'm sharing with you. It's not something that I know a lot about, but I do know that a large percentage of those farms are corporation owned. A small number, unfortunately, of mom and pop farmers that are raising their chickens. And there's been some contention in communities across Ohio with those large mega farms raising chickens because of the runoff of the manure and the way that they're caging the chickens and the health conditions and what that means to not only those of us who may eat it, but also the quality of the farms and the chickens that are produced. There are some farmers in the Ohio General Assembly, and certainly those who are on the Agriculture Committee are looking at a number of issues. But specifically around the payment, I haven't heard that one. Well, I thank you all. You've asked some very good questions, and I hope I've responded appropriately to them. Certainly, if you have any other questions, you have my contact information in my newsletter, and I appreciate that you all want to be broadcasters, news folks, certainly radio personalities, as well as the technicians and those in front of the camera, behind the camera, you know, sharing information, because that's really important, and particularly in the business that I'm in. We are to be public servants. We've got to share what we're doing, and you all are going to provide the way for us to do that. So I thank you, and I thank the Center for inviting me out today on Constitution Day.
Well, Senator Tavares, on behalf of all of the students and staff here today, I would like to present you with the Certificate of Appreciation for
you.
taking time out of your day today.
Thank you
And,
very much.
One final round of applause. Ohio
Thank
Senator.
you all very much. Thank you. Good person.
Oh, sure. Can we do a quick photo?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You want to do one?
Oh, sure.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.